Hello and welcome to the award-winning Tough Girl podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. Today, I'm thrilled to announce a special collaboration with Innovate, a world-renowned and ambitious sportswear pioneer. Innovate will be sponsoring the Tough Girl podcast throughout the month of June, with new episodes going live every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 a.m. UK time. Innovate is a UK-based company, and it is their mission to empower the world's physical and mental fitness through more fulfilling sporting experiences. I've been wearing Innovate trainers and sportswear since 2019 on all my adventures and challenges around the world. Most recently over in New Zealand while I walked the Tiara Trail, and in Spain when I was on the Camino Viva de la Plata. With Innovate's support, I'm able to continue showcasing incredible female role models who take on adventures and physical challenges. Stay tuned for an incredible episode filled with stories, insights, top tips and advice to motivate and inspire you. To find out more about Innovate, visit the Tough Girl website or search Innovate Sportswear online. You can also use the discount code ToughGirl15, ToughGirl15 to get 15% off your next order.
Hi, my name is Audrey Payne. I am a hiking and backpacking enthusiast living in Boulder, Colorado in the States. I'm originally from the East Coast, so I grew up in Upstate New York, which is really green and lush and beautiful. And from there, I ended up in Washington, D.C. for a few years working on my career. And after some burnout and hiking the Appalachian Trail, I found my way to Colorado, where I was looking for a lot more wilderness access and outdoor opportunities, which I happily found here.
Were you outdoorsy? Were your family outdoorsy? Did you go hiking? Did you spend much time outdoors when you were growing up?
Oh gosh, yes. So that's why I always specify upstate New York, because New York is a huge state. From my hometown, it actually takes about 8 hours to drive to New York City. So I'm from a really rural area, lots of forests, lots of farms. I grew up outside of a town of like 5,000 people. My backyard was the woods, and my family we didn't have a lot of money. But we spent a lot of time, like a lot of our vacations, we would go camping, and my parents loved to take us to the local state park, Allegheny State Park, where we'd go hiking and biking and swim in the lake and go camping and all that sort of good stuff. So very, very far from city life.
You definitely had like hiking knowledge then, and outdoors and wilderness and camping.
Yeah. So my parents used to really love to hike, and so they would take us as kids. And so we always did that. And then when I was a teenager, I was introduced to backpacking. I was selected for a scholarship through my school for this program called AFS, which is an exchange program for high school students. And I was chosen to spend a summer abroad, and I ended up going to New Zealand, where I spent 3 or 4 weeks at an outdoor pursuit center and then stayed with a host family for a few weeks and did community service. But at that outdoor pursuit center, we went on some backpacking trips and tried rock climbing and kayaking and all sorts of adventurous stuff. So that is where I got my first backpacking experience.
What an incredible opportunity. How old were you when you went over to New Zealand?
Oh my gosh, I was so lucky, so lucky. I feel like it changed the trajectory of my entire life. You know, it opened me up to all of these outdoor pursuits. It opened me up to international travel. It gave me a lot of confidence and independence. And I was only 16 when I went.
That's just like a life-changing opportunity to go to the other side of the world, to go to New Zealand, which is such a beautiful, stunning, safe country with no dangerous animals apart from sandflies, and to experience their outdoors for the couple of months that you were out there. I mean, how did that change you when you came back? You sort of said it sort of changed the direction of your life. Did it change what you wanted to do or what your next step were for you, at that sort of quite a crucial age at 16?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I just think that it opened up my world so much. I mean, like I said, I'm from a very small town in a rural area. I was very innocent, very naive, very sheltered. And just getting to travel to the other side of the world without my family, I didn't know a soul going on this trip, right? And I was exposed to the other culture of New Zealand and New Zealand's people, but also the other students in my group They were from all over the United States and Canada. And so many of them were city kids or living a different sort of lifestyle than I was. And then, just getting introduced to all of these different outdoor and adventure pursuits. I mean, I love to travel, and I'm the only one in my family. My family's not like that at all. I'm kind of a black sheep in that way. But, when I was in college, I ended up studying abroad again, and I absolutely credit that to my experience when I was in high school going to New Zealand. I ended up spending a semester abroad in Madagascar when I was in college. And I was living in a tent in a rainforest at a research station, studying lemurs and rainforest ecology and anthropology. And just from there, I mean, my love of travel and adventure in the outdoors just continued.
What did you study at college?
I studied environmental science and journalism, and I minored in anthropology.
So you were in upstate New York. You were then over in Washington, D.C., and then you mentioned the words burnout. Would you like to share more about what happened then?
Yeah, so I ended up moving to Washington, D.C. for grad school, where I studied public relations. I really wanted to work for like a big environmental nonprofit organization doing conservation type of work. And in my case, I really wanted to combine my environmental science degree with my public relations master's degree. And so I really wanted to work on like the communications team of one of these big organizations. So when I first landed there, I was in grad school and doing internships and just being busy for the entire time, but it was great. I loved it. I learned so much. And then from there, I jumped in. I had several grad school professors who recommended starting out at a public relations agency because they said that's where you'll get the most kind of fast-paced experience, spend a few years there, learn a ton, and then go on to maybe in-house PR or whatever. So I took their advice. I worked for an entertainment communications firm. And so I was doing movie publicity and promotions, which was really interesting. It was not what I wanted to do long term, but it was really, really interesting. And I learned a ton. I was planning publicity tours for different, like I would work for a number of movie distribution studios. So think Sony and Paramount and A24 and those sorts of places. And when they had movies come out, they would have their actors and directors and writers go on tour to promote the movies in different cities. And so I was in charge of, for those studios, promoting the movies in Washington, D.C. So I would plan, like they would send an actor into town. I would plan their entire 2 days that they were in D.C. I'd book their hotel and their car, and I'd plan all their press interviews and plan their Q&A screenings and special events and red carpets. So I did that for a few years, and I was working at least like 60 hours a week on average. And then from there, I landed my dream job at a big environmental nonprofit organization, which was amazing. But living in DC, the focus is really on your career. Everyone is just so focused on their job, so focused on their career, and you're just expected to be available for your job 24/7. And so during the end of my movie publicity job and this job at the big environmental nonprofit, I had a really bad injury that I got. I herniated a disc in my back during a group exercise class, which led to horrendous pain and having to go to doctor's appointments constantly, eventually a surgery. And so just dealing with that injury and having to work all of the time, it just became too much for me. And I got really, really burnt out.
When did you start thinking about the Appalachian Trail or going hiking? How did that come about?
When I was dealing with the back injury, I've always been a really active person, really into exercise. I used to really love to run. I've always liked to hike and work out and just be generally very active. But when I was dealing with my back injury, I had to basically quit most active pursuits cold turkey. I had to completely stop running. I could hike occasionally, but I was in a great deal of pain. I just couldn't do all of those activities anymore that I really loved. And I mean, this lasted like 2.5, 3 years. And so during that time, I was doing a ton of reading. because I've always loved to read, but I just couldn't do many other things at that time. And so I was doing a ton of reading, and I read Bill Bryson's A Walk in the Woods about his experience hiking the Appalachian Trail. And he talks a lot in his book about the natural history of the trail and the history itself of the trail. And I just got really interested in all of those things and really inspired. And so the idea of hiking the Appalachian Trail really stuck with me. And I decided at that time, if I am ever healthy enough to do this, I'm going to go hike the AT.
I think I'm in quite a unique situation these days because I've sort of like developed my life to be a life that I don't really need to escape from. It's like, if I want to do something, I write it down. If I've got the time and the money, I'll get it booked in and I will just go and do it. But I think what really
That's amazing.
It is. And I'm probably very proactive in that way. Like I'm a very take action type of person. But I know that there are other people who are obviously not maybe, who are different to me on that spectrum of taking action, and that actually to commit, to make the decision to start taking those first steps to something that you've thought about and dreamed about can actually be incredibly challenging. And so I always find it really fascinating learning more about how you went from reading Bill Bryson's book, dealing with this really tough physical situation when you're in pain. You're not able to do the things that you love with regards to physical activity, which then is it going to impact the amount of endorphins that you're going to be getting, or how you probably dealt with your stress from your job, things like that accumulating. Like, how did you get from where you were to the start? I'm presuming you went from Springer Mountain to, how did you get to the start line of the Appalachian Trail?
You hit the nail on the head. Like, I definitely was going through endorphin withdrawal while I was dealing with that injury, for sure. So I was dealing with the injury mostly when I was working at the movie publicity firm, and I had gotten surgery basically I started to recover from surgery basically at the end of that job. And that's when I really started thinking about hiking the AT seriously. So that was in like 2015. And then as soon as I started getting better from the surgery, I landed my dream job, which was at World Wildlife Fund. And so then I was like, well, I'm still really interested in hiking the AT, but I've landed this dream job. I can't give up this opportunity. And so I told myself, look, spend 2 years at this job. And if this idea is still hounding you, you still desperately want to go hike this trail and you're feeling okay, your back is doing okay, then go do it. And so I think what really helped me was I started telling people about this plan and taking it at least kind of seriously. And then in 2017, I had been at my job for just over a year, and I posted about it on Instagram. I reread A Walk in the Woods. I posted about it on Instagram. I talked about my aspirations for doing the trail. And a friend of mine from college, who I had actually met studying abroad in Madagascar, reached out to me and was like, hey, I'm also really interested in doing that trail, and I don't really want to be at my job anymore. Maybe we should hike it together. It had been a long time since our study abroad. It had been several years. And so we hadn't really spent much time together at all. I think I'd seen her like 2 or 3 times since the study abroad. And I mean, it'd been an interesting experience because we had been living in tents at a research center in a rainforest when we knew each other. So we had spent 3 months running around the outdoors together at that time. So we knew we were at least semi-compatible for this sort of endeavor. But, it'd been several years. We didn't really know each other well anymore. But we decided to meet up for a weekend of backpacking. And our intention was, okay, neither of us have been backpacking in a while and we haven't spent any time together. So let's go meet up and we'll see how we feel at the end. So we met up for a weekend of backpacking in Pennsylvania, which was like halfway between where we were living. And we spent, I think, 3 days, 2 nights out there maybe. And at the beginning of the weekend, I already was like, I want to go do this trail and I want to do it within the next 2 years. And she was like, well, I'm not really sure yet. Let's just see how this weekend goes. And by the end of that weekend, she was like, let's do it. Let's go next year. And so next year was a few months away. And so we stayed in touch and we kept talking about it and we kept hyping each other up. And she actually was able to get a leave of absence at her job. She'd been there for like 5 years. And so she told her boss a few months in advance. And so because she had already told her boss and was already planning for this leave of absence, I was like, well, now I can't back out because she's already changed her life around for this. And so she just kept being like, did you tell your boss yet? Did you tell your boss yet? And I had given myself a deadline of 1 month before we were going to leave for the trail. And finally, it was down to the day. It was 1 month before. And finally, she was like, you have to go do it today. And I was like, I know. And so I went in his office and immediately started crying and told him I was leaving.
What did he say?
Oh, he was so nice about it. He was so nice about it. I just walked in there and I started to try to speak, and then I immediately just started sobbing, and he just hugs me. And he's like, hey, it's okay. Whatever it is. Like, I think this probably means you're leaving, but it's all right. And I was like, I'm leaving, and this is what I'm leaving for. And he was like, wow, I am so proud of you. He was like, I really, when I was younger, I thought about leaving my job to go live on a boat. I love boating. That's my great passion. And he's like, I never did it, and I regret it. And I'm so proud of you for doing this.
What a good boss. Like I think I'm so used to so many stories of people just dealing with awful, stressful, horrendous working conditions and awful bosses who just make everything hellish. It's so nice to hear somebody who had like a supportive boss who understood what it is that you wanted to do and why you wanted to do it. 1 month. Had you been actively getting your gear together? Did you already have funds saved? Did you have a time frame of how long you wanted to be out there? Was your back good, doing okay? Were you back to fitness? What did you need to get ready in that 30-day period before you set off with your friend?
So I had been saving for about a year prior, but I definitely would have liked to have more money saved. But unfortunately, DC is a very expensive city, super expensive to live in. And, I had been out of work for a bit because of my back issues. So that kind of compounded, but I had been saving for a while. I didn't have a ton of money for extra gear. So I used a lot of the gear that I already had. And so I went out there, and I feel like all these people had all of this fancy new ultralight gear. And there I was with like a 40-pound pack weighing me down. And I feel like people were constantly being like, wow, your pack is so big. And I'm like, oh, it's fine. I do okay. I can still get up the mountains. So I had a lot of the gear already. So I didn't have to go out and get a ton of gear. But for me, it was more like I had to finish up everything at work. I had to move out of my apartment in DC. My dad drove down the 7 hours to come help me move a bunch of my stuff, which I stored in my cousin's basement in New York. So once I wrapped up work, I just put the rest of my stuff in my car or gave away whatever else wouldn't fit. And then I drove up to my parents' house in New York to take the rest of my stuff there and spend a little time with my family for a couple of days before flying down to Georgia. And actually, I flew down to North Carolina, and my friend who I went with, her mom picked me up in North Carolina and drove us to the trailhead. Yeah, that was the story. So we started at Amicalola Falls State Park. So we did the 8-point-something mile approach trail to start the AT to get to Springer Mountain.
Was this 2017?
This was 2018.
So you're there on the start line with your gear, with your friend. Like, what are you thinking? Like, what is going through your head at this point?
Oh my gosh. Well, let me say that in the weeks before I started the trail, once I had put in my notice with my boss that I was leaving my job, I dealt with a lot of anxiety. I was just super anxious because it had taken me a few years in DC to land this dream job. And I did have a great boss, and I loved my job. And it was something that I had worked for several years to get to. So I just was like, am I crazy? Like, why am I throwing this away? Why is this trail calling to me so intensely? Like, what am I doing? But once I actually got to the start of the trail, that all of that anxiety dissipated. I walked through the arch at Amicalola Falls State Park, and I just felt so at peace and excited. And I was like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. this is what I'm supposed to be doing right now. Everything's fine.
How long did those feelings last for? When did reality kick in? And if it did, or when did it get to the point where you were like, oh God, what am I doing? This is really hard.
Oh my gosh. No, that feeling lasted the entire 6 months that I was out there. I mean, obviously there were hard days and hard conditions and I wasn't over the moon every single day, but I was so happy and grateful to be there every single day. I think for me, it was like because I had to give up all of those activities and hadn't been able to travel and hadn't been able to really hike much or do anything for several years during my back injury. I think that I was just so grateful and felt like I had a second chance at the life that I had seen for myself. Not necessarily that I had known I was going to hike the AT, but just coming back to who I was and what I loved. And I just felt so grateful to be there. And I had so much fun. I had so much fun. Like the AT is such a social trail. There's such a strong community out there. And I made so many friends and got all of those endorphins back that I had been missing for those few years. And I just had a blast. I just absolutely loved it.
Oh, do you know what? I love that so much. Like you can hear the happiness, you can hear your smile, and it's like, yeah, because you're doing what you love. You've put yourself out there. You've taken on this epic challenge. Did you get a trail name?
I did. My trail name was Glowstick, and I got it because the first night on Springer Mountain. So like I said, I just used a lot of gear that I already had. And I opened up my tent and set it up. And inside there was a bright yellow glowing glow stick that had obviously just been cracked because I hadn't used my tent since I had been at a music festival several months prior. And then I also got off the trail for a couple of weekends, once for a music festival and once for a wine festival. So my trail friends thought it appropriate to call me Glowstick.
What was your day to day like? Did you get into your routines? How do you walk? Did you have a stove? Were you stoveless? Were you listening to music or podcasts? Did you manage to stick with a trail family? What was the day to day like for you?
Yeah, so I started the trail with one friend. Her trail name is Ibex. And then night one, we stayed at the Springer Mountain shelter and campsite. And we picked up another girl that night that we really got along with. We had dinner with her and chatted with her a bunch. And by the next morning, she stopped by our tents and was like, hey, can I hike out with you guys? Like, I'm all alone. Like, it'd be nice to hike with some other women. And we were like, heck yeah, of course, come along. And so right from the beginning, there were three of us. And then within a week, we had gotten into a trail family with several other people. And we actually stayed, Ibex and I stayed in a trail family until the end of the trail. The trail family would sometimes change, like someone would leave, someone would come in, whatever, but we were in a family the whole time, basically. And then there were certain periods, like when I got off the trail to go to the festivals that I mentioned, I would spend a few days catching up. And so then I'd be hiking by myself. But I feel like every day you were meeting new people and those people would kind of come and go on the trail and sometimes they would reappear on the trail. So that was a really fun aspect of it, the social aspect. So I was making decisions with other people about how far we were going to hike each day. And we wouldn't necessarily hike together. Sometimes we would, but not always. But we would plan like, okay, so here is the campsite we're going to go tonight. Here's the next town that we're going to go visit in however many days. And so you might not leave with anyone in the morning, but you knew that you would see them probably for breaks during the day, definitely at the campsite that night. And we'd all have dinner together. And when we'd go to towns, we would get hotels together and generally have meals together. I had a stove. I'm anti-stoveless. I think being stoveless for myself sounds a little miserable. I'm a big coffee gal. I like having my morning coffee. I'm not a morning person, so that helps me get going in the morning. So that's one reason. And then I love having a warm meal at the end of the day. It's like whatever you go through during the day, you're dealing with snow or ice or rain or bugs or whatever it is, at the end of the day, there's going to be a nice hot meal waiting for you. And for me, that's important to morale. So I don't think I could ever be stoveless.
So what time would you be starting in the morning?
Let's see. I would say generally we would start around 8 to 9 a.m.
What sort of food were you eating on the trail? Were you doing like the prepackaged meals? Were you ramen all the way? What did that look like?
Gosh, let me just say that I have learned my lesson from this, but I was definitely not living on the healthiest foods at the time. I didn't have a ton of extra money, so I just couldn't be buying those fancy backpacker meals all of the time. I was living on a lot of ramen, a lot of norpasticides, a lot of junk food, lots of sugar. I liked to say that I was hummingbirding my way through the trail. So I was eating a ton of sugar. And, I think that I kind of used the excuse. This was my first long distance backpacking trip. So I think I was using it as an excuse to eat all the junk foods that I normally wouldn't eat, or at least eat very often in normal life. So yeah, a lot of junk food.
I was gonna say, it doesn't really change. Or maybe it does for you, but like when I'm on trail, sometimes it's I mean, I am stoveless, so but sometimes all my body is like, I want chocolates, I want crisps, so I want the salt and I want the sugar, and I want gummy sweets, which apparently, I Googled this, it's because my body's lacking nitrogen. So that's why I crave yeah. So it's like if you're craving like chocolate, it means you're generally like magnesium deficient. If you're craving, I need to double check this, but at one point when I was out in New Zealand and I was craving baked beans, and it's like this is something that I've never craved before in my life. And apparently it's because I needed more protein in my diet. So I've just looked it up now. So if you crave chocolate, you are wanting magnesium, so you could eat cashew nuts. If you're craving bread, it means that you're missing nitrogen, and so you should eat like beans. This is it. Candy. If you're craving like candy and sweets, which is what I crave, it's chromium. So therefore eating grapes. Now, a lot of people also crave ice cream, and I can't pronounce this. Tryptophan, Phan.
Oh, tryptophan?
Tryptophan. Thank you. Then apparently you should be eating walnuts. So, which I found fascinating. Did you do the ice cream challenge?
I didn't. I wish that I could have, but I'm very unfortunately, my body doesn't do well with heavy dairies and lots of fat like that. So no, that would have made me very ill, unfortunately,
Yeah.
but I wish I could have participated.
I think it's disgusting. It's like, I can't remember if it's like a liter or a liter and a half of ice cream. I didn't do it either because I was like, no, I will get ill from eating that much. Thinking back to 2018, it's a few years ago now. But what do you think are maybe some of the key lessons that you learned and that you took away from going on this experience and having this adventure?
Oh gosh. Well, I think one lesson was I was so anxious beforehand. I was worried that I was ruining my career by taking a break and all that kind of stuff. And one lesson that I learned is that the skills and the lessons and the experiences that you have, you carry forward with you. So it's not like, I don't know why I was so anxious about it, because it's not like I was leaving those skills that I had learned at my jobs behind. I was still carrying those forward with me. So I actually really didn't have a hard time getting a new job afterwards at all. And I very luckily ended up at a really great organization, and I have another great boss at this place that I'm still at. So that was a big lesson. I think for me also, like thinking about my actual trail experience, one source of conflict was within the trail family. Certain people wanted to hike fast and not really stop to smell the roses and kind of run from town to town and finish in a faster time frame. And other people like me wanted to really go slow and enjoy the experience and swim in every lake and stream and pond and just really get the most out of the trail while I was out there. And I found myself being really influenced in some ways by what other people wanted. And so that's definitely something that I have carried into future adventures, whereas to just kind of check in with myself and be like, is what this other person wants, is that working for me? Can I compromise on this? Should I compromise on this? Or should I go my own way? So that was a big lesson learned. My trail family did eventually break up, but we stayed together from basically North Carolina until Vermont. So that's a big chunk of the trail to be hiking on someone else's schedule. And I have regrets about that. So that was a big lesson learned. And back to the food thing. Also, my body really started breaking down by the end of the AT. I got very strong, and you can see the muscle in my photos, but I'd say my last state or two, especially in Maine, I got terribly exhausted all of a sudden. Even though I was in the best shape of my life, my hair started falling out. My body took on this kind of like sickly sweet smell. I remained tired for a couple of months after the trail and finally went and got some blood work done and found out that I was really anemic, which, women are prone to becoming anemic. And that was a testament to me not eating the right things and taking care of my body in the way that I should have been. And anemia takes a while to correct, like 6 months to a year to correct in many circumstances. And so I definitely learned my lesson as far as like paying attention to what I'm eating on trail. And that doesn't mean never eating ramen, or I'm probably still going to eat candy every single day. But it also means like, hey, making sure that you're also getting the right nutrients and maybe taking a multivitamin and some iron on the side.
Yeah. It's a dichotomy with like through hiking, because yes, you become the fittest you've ever been. You're outdoors in nature all the time. You're living this amazing lifestyle. But I do think it's like a bell curve, and it does get to a point where I think your body, depending on how long you're out on trail for, does start to break down more. There is just that wear and tear if you're not getting the nutrients, and you're not necessarily sleeping that well. But I love what you shared about that powerful lesson about actually checking in with yourself. Hold on, am I doing this for me? Am I on somebody else's schedule? Because it's okay to be selfish on these trips. It's okay to be like, actually, you know what? Look at that lake. I'm going to go for a swim. You want to carry on, like almost like you do you, like hike your own hike, as cheesy as that sounds. And you wrote a book about your hike, where the rhododendrons bloom. How was that process? Reflecting back, I suppose, again, and putting it down on paper, the lessons that you've learned, and why did you want to share more about your through hiking adventure on the Appalachian Trail?
Oh gosh, writing the book 5 years after my hike really it gave me the chance to process everything from kind of an outside perspective a few years later. And very luckily, I took very detailed journal entries while I was on the trail. I took a lot of photos. So I had a lot of things to go back on. And it was kind of incredible to me how much I remembered as well. I had first started to write the book right when I had finished my thru hike. I had put all my journal entries together. I started writing it. I found that I just could not do it at that time. A very common phenomenon that happens to people after these long hikes is going through what they call post-trail depression or the post-trail blues. And I dealt with some pretty bad post-trail depression, which I think was for a number of factors. I think not hiking 15 to 20 miles every single day, you're not getting all of those endorphins and other brain chemicals that your body has grown accustomed to. You're not outside in natural light all day, every day. And then for me, I went back and stayed with my parents for a few months while I was looking for a new job. And they're from a really gloomy part of the US, which I was having trouble dealing with. I think I was there with them for 3 months and the sun came out like 3 days. It was terrible. I started writing the book, but I just found that I was still really grieving my experience at that time. I had loved my hike so much and I had such a strong community out there. And I was just devastated that the experience had ended. Like I would wake up from dreams where I was still out on the trail, and then I'd have to realize like, oh no, I'm in my childhood bed. I'm not actually out on the AT. For my own well-being and to allow me to kind of move on from that experience, I had to shelve the project. And I did think that at some point I would open it back up. Like I really just felt like I had had this really interesting and life-changing experience on the AT, and I wanted to share that with people, but I just couldn't do it in that moment. So I thought, okay, I'll shelve it for now. I'll move on. I'll kind of build my new life in Colorado and with this new job and everything, and then I'll come back to it. And I just never, ever wanted to open it again until suddenly a few months ago, I had just gotten back from another trail. I hiked the Wonderland Trail in Washington State, which was absolutely wonderful. And my roommate was away for a couple of months. And I just got the feeling like, oh, I want to do some writing. And I write a lot for work now, so I don't often write a lot for fun. But something within me was like, I want to write again. I want to write for fun. I want to write for myself. What can I write about? And something in my brain just was like, why don't you just open up that project and just see what happens? And so I opened it up, my document with all my journal entries and everything. And I started writing, and I did not stop writing for a week and a half. Every single free moment outside of work, I was writing. I would get off of work at 4 p.m. and I'd be like, I'm just going to write for an hour. Next thing I would know, it would be midnight. I had not stopped writing the entire time, and I'd have to force myself to go to bed. Like my entire weekends, nothing but writing. And so it actually only took me a week and a half to write the first draft, which was crazy because the first time I had tried right after I was done with the AT, it just felt so hard. And then 5 years later, open up the project and it's done in the blink of an eye.
Timing, and just being in the right space mentally, physically, emotionally. But honestly, massive congratulations on your book. And you're still hiking on a pretty regular basis now, aren't you? Like, how often are you getting out there and adventuring?
Oh gosh, yeah, I am. So moved to Colorado, and now I live in this beautiful town where there are hiking trails just minutes away from my apartment. It's so easy. The people here are also, most of the people I know in Colorado are also into outdoor activities. Everyone's always, you get to work on Monday. Everyone's asking, oh, where'd you go skiing this weekend? Where did you go hiking this weekend? Where'd you go camping this weekend? Because it's such a big part of normal life here. And so I'm out hiking every single weekend. Some weekdays after work too. And then I've also gone on to do several other long distance backpacking trails, none quite as long as the AT, but I've hiked the Colorado Trail here in Colorado, which is about 500 miles. I've hiked the John Muir Trail in California, which is about 211 to 240, depending on how you do it. I've hiked the Wonderland Trail in Washington State. I've gone down to Patagonia to hike the O Circuit. Like, it's just very much a part of my normal everyday life now. And that's how I'm spending all of my time off from work, is going out on these hiking trails and adventures.
Can you see yourself sort of quitting, pausing, taking time away from your work to do another long distance trail, such as the PCT or the Continental Divide Trail?
Oh, absolutely. 100% yes. So this is kind of interesting. I have a wonderful boss who's very supportive and wants all of us to be able to live our lives and have a job, right? And so I had been thinking I really wanted to go hike the PCT. And so last year I had asked him if he would consider within the next 2 years giving me a leave of absence to go hike the PCT. And he was super, super supportive. He was going to have to bring it up the chain of command, but he was like, I really think that we can make this happen for you. I'm really supportive. I want to be able to help you do this. But then I went and hiked the John Muir Trail, which is part of the PCT last summer, and it just didn't resonate with me. Like I just didn't love it. And so I was like, oh, this might actually be the wrong trail. The PCT might not be the one that I should be aiming for. And so then I came back and I was like, I still want to go do another long trail, but I'd like a little more time to kind of figure out which one I want to do next. And he was like, that's fine. Circle back with me And again, I think we can really make this happen for you. So that's where I'm at right now in trying to figure out which trail is my next trail.
Would you want to stay in America, or would you look to like Europe or further afield?
I'm open, honestly. I just want to really feel passionately about the trail. If I'm going to go take, 6 months off of work and life and everything to do it, I just really want to feel passionately and like pulled to it. So I'm still trying to kind of figure out what it is, but I'm open worldwide.
Audrey, how can people, how can they follow along with your future hikes? How can they read your blog? How can they buy copies of your book? Where were you most active on social media?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Audrey Payne. You can find me on YouTube at Audrey Adventures. You can check out my website at audrey-adventures.com. And you can find my book, Where the Rhododendrons Bloom, on Amazon and Kindle.
And Audrey, I'd love for you to have the final words of advice, final words of wisdom for other women who are maybe in a similar situation that you're in at the moment, where like they're trying to figure out like what's next? What are my next steps? What advice would you like to share?
I would just say keep an open mind, and when the right thing comes along, then it will come along. You know what I mean? Like when the AT kind of came on my radar, that's it. I knew that I had to go do it, and I loved every second of it. So I would just say keep an open mind, and I think it will come to you.
Absolutely. And when it does, grab that opportunity, say yes.
Oh, heck yeah. Heck yeah.
Audrey, thank you so much for coming on Tough Girl Podcast. Incredible to speak to you, and just best of luck with all your future hikes and adventures. And thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me. I absolutely love your podcast. So it was an honor to be here.
Hey tribe, I really hope you enjoyed that episode with Audrey. What an absolute inspiration. As always, everything that we have talked about today will be available in the show notes at toughgirlchallenges.com. So please do go and check it out. Big shout out to Innovate, who is sponsoring the Tough Girl podcast this month, with new episodes going live every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 a.m. UK time. So Innovate is a UK company. It is based in the Lake District, and Innovate has always been about pushing limits and empowering athletes. They have actually unveiled a fresh new look in 2024, which you may have seen. They have got a new logo. It is like a talon, which is representing their commitment to helping us stay in control and balance on our fitness journeys. But I just want to share a little bit more about what the talon logo represents. So the talon logo represents Innovate's commitment to helping athletes stay in control and balanced on their fitness journey. So just like birds use their talons for grip and stability, the talon logo symbolizes Innovate's dedication to providing athletes with the support they need to conquer challenges and achieve their goals. So it embodies the brand's ethos of empowerment and resilience, reflecting their mission to empower athletes worldwide, which is pretty cool when you really, really think about it. A couple of the key words there are sort of like grip and stability. And that's one thing that I've noticed wearing Innovate trainers over the past 4.5 years now, is their grip, their graphene infused soles. Like there's nothing else like it on the market. And you really, really do notice it when you are on the trails, especially sort of the more muddy, the more challenging trails out there. Like you do actually need that grip and the support. So I have actually written, I've worn about 5 or 6 different sort of Innovate trainers over the years, and I've actually written dedicated reviews on them with more information about them, from the hiking boots, from the rock fly, from the trail fly, to the rock light, to waterproof shoes, to not waterproof shoes. So there is a whole variety of information about the different types of shoes. But what I would say about the trainers is you have to make sure that the trainers fit your feet. So even though they work super, super well for me, it doesn't mean they're going to work super well for you. So it is about testing them out, trying them out, and saying, actually, you know what? Yes, these do work for me. The grip, absolutely, it is going to work for everybody. It's just whether or not the trainers and the hiking boots actually fit you. So that's what you need to figure out. But if you search for Innovate online, you can visit their website, inov8.com. There is more information about all of their different types of products. So it's not just trainers, they also have clothing as well. So the other main sort of piece of clothing that I really recommend as well is their Storm Shell waterproof jacket. So if you've seen any of my adventures over the past couple of years, you'll have seen that I've worn like a pink waterproof jacket and also like a blue waterproof jacket. Those are the Storm Shell waterproof jackets. They are just super lightweight, incredible pieces of gear. Cannot recommend them highly enough. So well worth checking out. But look, if you do have any questions about Innovate products, or you see me wearing anything and you think, oh, I'd love to know a little bit more about that, please just send me a DM, probably best on Instagram. Let me know if you've got any questions. More than happy to come back to you with the answers. But you can also get a discount. So if you use the discount code ToughGirl10, no, if you use the discount code ToughGirl15, ToughGirl15, you will get a 15% discount on anything that you buy. So you can't use that if there's like a summer sale on, for example, and there's already 50% off. You can't use that on top of the 50% off. So yeah, that is just something to bear in mind before you go and buy some Innovate gear. Thank you so much for listening. Like I mentioned before, new episodes coming out every Tuesday and Thursday, 7 a.m. at UK time. And we have got so many cracking women coming on the podcast this month, and I can't wait to share their stories with you. All that's left for me to say is, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, give it your all, give it 110%, get after it, go for it, believe in yourself, because I believe in you. Take care, lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon.